All right, y'all. If part 1 was the chaos, well, part 2 leads to the decisions. The desperate ones, the risky ones, the ones that changed everything. And I need you to hear this clearly. The story does not end here. This fire stretches across episodes, stretches across days, stretches across people making choices they can't undo. So stay with me through the series, because what we're stepping into right now is where everything gets worse. The moment they decide to blow up the city. By midday, April 18th, San Francisco is already burning, out of water, losing ground. The fire department, effectively, they were helpless. Water mains were broken, fires were everywhere, and the leadership, they were fractured. The fire chief, Dennis Sullivan, is gravely injured from the earthquake and dies days later. So now you've got this situation: no water, no unified command, and no clear plan. And that's when somebody says it, the thing that sounds crazy, until you realize you're out of options. Blow it up. The plan? It was to destroy in order to save. The idea wasn't new. It had been used in other big fires. Create fire breaks, destroy buildings, so the fire has nowhere else to spread. Sounds logical, right? Except for one problem. This plan only works if you know what you're doing. And in San Francisco, most of the people using the dynamite, they didn't have a clue. Here comes the first explosion. You hear glass shattering, fire crackling, louder and louder. Imagine standing there. You just survived the earthquake, the fire, and suddenly, explosions start? Not one, but dozens. Eyewitnesses describe explosions going off every few minutes, day and night. Buildings collapsing, not from fire, but from force. Walls blown inward, roofs lifted off, debris thrown into the streets. Now picture that in your mind. Your city's already burning, and now it's exploding around you too. There was a man who heard it coming. He was walking through the streets, thinking he's escaped the fire. Then he hears it. A low rumble, then a crack, then a thunderous boom. He turns, and he sees a building collapsing, not burning, but literally collapse around him. Dust fills the air. Smoke mixes with it. People start screaming. They're blowing the buildings up. He runs again, because now the danger isn't just fire. It's the ground in front of you being destroyed on purpose. The work that went into setting the bombs, here's something most people don't realize. Setting those explosives, it wasn't simple. Soldiers and crews had to carry dynamite by hand, enter buildings already on fire, place charges while sparks rained down around them. Sometimes they had to climb poles, handle damaged wires, dodge falling debris, just to set explosions. That wasn't controlled demolition. That was danger on top of danger. The problem nobody saw coming. Now here's where everything shifts. Because the plan didn't work the way they expected. The explosives used, including black powder, crude methods, poor placement, instead of stopping the fire, they often started new ones. Blown buildings didn't always fall clean. Sometimes they scattered, burning debris, exposing fresh wood, spreading flames into new areas. So now imagine realizing the thing you're using to stop the fire is feeding it. When the explosions turn into fuel, one report describes it bluntly: dynamiting helps spread the fire rather than stop it. Another building describes artillery lighting buildings like Roman candles, with flames bursting upwards after explosions. And in one area, Explosions along the Van Ness Avenue triggered a new blaze to spread across dozens of blocks. That's the part that gives me chills, because nobody meant for that to happen. But once it did, there was no undoing it. People were getting trapped between fires and explosions. One woman, running with her family, stops when she sees the soldiers. They're shouting, "You have to move. This block is being dynamited." She turns. Fire behind her, explosives ahead. For a moment, there's just nowhere safe. They run anyway because staying still means death either way. That's not a choice. That's survival making the decision for you. At this point in the story, people stop trying to understand because nothing makes sense anymore. You've got ground moving, fire spreading, buildings exploding, and no clear direction for safety. That is where this fear changes. It's not panic anymore. It's that deep, steady realization. This is bigger than us. And it doesn't stop here. The dynamiting continues for days. Fire continues for days. The destruction, it's still growing. And this is just the beginning. Could you imagine how much more intense this episode's going to get? Because this is just the beginning of episode 2. Now, I want you to sit with this before we go on. Because next, we step deeper into the chaos. The fires forming into full firestorms, the wind turning the city into a furnace, survival getting harder, and the darker sides of human behavior start to show. And I'm telling you right now, it gets heavier from here. Here in a minute, we're going to go into the firestorm, where the fire begins behaving like a living thing, entire blocks igniting at once, heat so intense people couldn't get close, and the moment San Francisco becomes unrecognizable, even to the people living in it. All right, y'all, we need to talk about something people don't fully understand. This wasn't just a fire. This became a firestorm, and those are two very different things. When fire becomes something else entirely, here's what actually happened. The fires burned so hot, temperatures reached extreme levels, capable of melting material like glass and metal. But the heat didn't just sit there. It rose, and it rose fast. And when that hot air shot upward, it created suction, pulling in more air from all directions, feeding the fire, making it stronger, making it faster. One account describes this effect like a giant chimney pulling the city upward into flames, creating its own wind. That's when the fire stops being something you fight, and it becomes something that runs its own. Now imagine this. There's no storm, there's no weather system, but suddenly, wind is everywhere, pulling flames down streets, across rooftops, into buildings that weren't even on fire yet. Fire doesn't need to touch something anymore. It just needs heat. And once heat reaches it, it ignites. Eyewitnesses said flames could jump entire blocks, spread faster than people could run. That means nowhere is safe. Not across the street, not across the corner, not even ahead of it. Whole blocks were visibly vanishing right before people's eyes. Now let me slow this down. One eyewitness describes time in a house burning, a full structure gone in about 20 minutes. Nothing left but the cellar. No beams, no walls, just absence. Now multiply that, block after block after block. Then street after street after street, until over 500 city blocks are destroyed. That's not destruction, that's eradication. The streets literally disappeared. A man runs down a street. He knows the street, walked it his whole life. He's trying to get ahead of the fire, but then he turns back just for a second. And what he sees, the buildings behind him, already collapsing. Flames pouring out of windows, roofs caving in, and in minutes, the street he just stood on is gone. That's the spread we're talking about. Not hours, minutes. The heat becomes the enemy. Now here's something survivors talk about a lot. The heat, it's not just hot. It's suffocating, pressing everywhere. It didn't matter if you touched the fire because the air itself could burn you. Imagine breathing and it hurts. Imagine opening your eyes and the heat alone makes them water. That's what they were standing in. One woman just couldn't breathe. She was running. She's not even close to the flames, but she can't breathe. Smoke fills her lungs. Heat fills the air. Every breath feels like she's inhaling something solid. She stops just for 1 second. Almost collapses because the body can only take so much. We always picture fire as something you see, but for a lot of people, it's what they felt inside their chest. It began moving like a living thing. The fire, by now, isn't just random. It has direction, movement, force. One account compared it to a funnel cloud moving through the city. Another described it as a sea of flames rolling through the streets. And when enough people describe something the same way, you start to realize that is what this felt like. Some people were watching the fire jump. One man stands at a distance, watching a building burn. He thinks, we're safe here, because the street is between them and the fire. But then he sees it, a small flame in the roof of the next building across the street. No contact, no spark he could trace, just heat. And in minutes, that building is burning too. That's the moment when logic stops working, because space doesn't protect you anymore. The man just couldn't be saved. This one is just really hard, but it's real. A man trapped under collapsed debris, people trying to help him, but the fire's coming closer, closer, and closer yet, until the flames reach his feet, and he realizes no one can get him out in time. One eyewitness described that moment like this, where the victim begged for relief as the fire approached. That's the kind of decision nobody should ever have to face, but during this disaster, it happened. The sky began turning black. A group of people standing far outside the city, watching, because it's all they can do now. They are far enough away to be safe, but close enough to see everything. And the sky, well, it turns black. Smoke rising so thick it blocks sunlight, then red from the glow of the flames beneath it. Eyewitnesses described a towering column of smoke visible from miles away. Imagine looking at your city, and it doesn't look like it's a piece anymore. It looks like something burning from the inside out. This is still not the worst part. Now, I need to be real with you. We're only halfway through this part of the disaster. Think, the fire's still burning, the explosions are still happening, the camps are still feeling. And what we haven't gotten to yet is what people started doing to survive. What happens when order breaks down and when the darker side of human behavior occurs. And that part, it's coming next. And you need to hear it too to understand this fully. What did people do to survive? We're going to get into it. There was looting. The shoot to kill atmosphere happened. Desperation. Moral lines were breaking. And the stories people tried to forget. You want to stay with this series? You really want to stay with this series? Because this isn't just one story. It's 6 episodes of a city falling apart, piece by piece. This is where people start changing. What did people do to survive? Well, we've talked about the fire, we've talked about the explosions, but now we need to talk about the people. Because when everything else falls apart, human behavior becomes unpredictable. The city's burning, the ground is unstable, the police force, well, could you imagine? They're overwhelmed. Communication's plumb gone. Leadership is scattered. And in that space, something fills the gap. What is that something? Well, it's fear. And where there's fear, that brings on lots of desperation. And desperation can push people past lines they never thought they'd cross. That led to the beginning of looting. It doesn't start with violence. It starts quiet. A store door breaks open. A window shatters. People step inside. Not because they're criminals, but because they need things. Food, water, clothing. One account describes shopkeepers themselves saying, "Take what you want. It's gonna burn anyway." Think about that. The rules don't apply anymore because the place those rules belong to is just gone. The lines between need and theft, well, they're blurred. A man walks into a store. He's never stolen anything in his life, but he hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. Everything he owns is gone. He looks around. Food is there. Clothes are there. No one's stopping him. He hesitates. Then he takes something. And in that moment, something inside of him shifts. Because sometimes survival doesn't feel like you're doing the right thing. It feels like you're doing the only thing left. But when it turns darker, we need to step into the harder part of the story because not everyone was taking what they needed. Some people took advantage. Eyewitness accounts describe something disturbing. Thieves stealing from the dead, cutting jewelry off bodies. In some cases, removing rings by force. And I want to be careful how I say this, but this is the reality. When systems collapse, some people don't just survive, they exploit it. One woman walking through the ruins. She's already shaken, already lost, when she sees it, a body in the street and someone kneeling beside it. At first she thinks they're helping, but then she realizes they're really not. They're taking something. And she freezes because she doesn't know what's worse, the disaster or what the people are becoming inside it. That kind of moment stays with you long after the fire is gone. Then the shoot to kill reality. Now here's where things escalate fast. Authorities realize what's happening. Looting, chaos, fear, and the response? Well, it was extreme. The mayor issues an order allowing soldiers, police, even special officers to kill anyone caught looting. Let that sink in. Not arrest, not warning, kill. One survivor was at the wrong place at the wrong time. A young man walking through the street. He's carrying something, maybe food, maybe medicine. A soldier sees him, shouts, "Drop it." And the man hesitates. Maybe he doesn't hear. Maybe he doesn't understand. Maybe he just needs it. And then a shot rings out. He falls. One account describes a man being shot simply for refusing to drop what he carried. That's how thin the lines became between survival and being seen as a threat. Fear changes everything. Now imagine trying to navigate this city. Fire in one direction, explosions in another, smoke overhead, and armed soldiers watching everything. At this point, people are afraid, and they're afraid of each other too, not just the disaster. And that changes a place faster than anything else ever could. When neighbors start looking at each other like enemies. A group of people moves through a street, quiet, too quiet, no voices, no crowds. But something feels wrong because they know anyone can be watching and anyone could decide they don't belong there. The man refuses to leave. Another story, one that shows the other side. A man stays behind in his home, even as the fire approaches, even as people warn him, because everything he has is there. He won't abandon it. And in that moment, it's not about survival. It's about identity, memory, refusing to let go. Not everyone runs. Some people, they stay. even when they shouldn't. People ask what this did to people. Some wonder what this did to people. By now, we've seen desperation, survival, fear, and violence. And we're only on day 2. This is a part of the story that people don't always like to talk about because it forces us to ask hard questions. What would we do if everything disappeared overnight? If no rules existed? If your next decision meant living or not? This story is still unfolding. Now listen, because this matters. We're still in the middle of this disaster. The fire's still burning. The camps are still filling. The city's still collapsing. And next, we're going to go deeper into the aftermath inside the camps, how people coped mentally, and the strange, almost unbelievable survival moments. And I need you to stay with the series, because this isn't just a story about destruction. It's a story about what people become when everything else is stripped away. What happens to the mind after the fire's gone? Well, all right, y'all. We've walked through the shaking, the fire, the explosions, the chaos, but now we need to step into something quieter. And in a lot of ways, more difficult to understand, because this part doesn't burn buildings. It burns inside people. And when everything slows down, some people have escaped. Some have reached camps. Some are just far enough away to breathe. And this is where something shifts, because when you stop running, your mind will catch up. And sometimes that's when it hits the hardest. A woman sits on the ground. Just hours ago, she was running through smoke, through heat, through crowds. Now, she's still. And people around her, well, they are talking and moving, trying to figure out things out. But she's not responding, not crying, not speaking, just sitting there, staring. Because sometimes the brain doesn't process trauma right away. Sometimes it waits until you're safe enough to feel it. At points, the world just doesn't feel real. One of the most common things survivors describe was this feeling that this all can't be real. Because look at what just happened. The ground moved, buildings collapsed, fire consumed entire blocks. The sky, well, it just turned black. Nothing about that feels normal. So the brain protects itself by disconnecting. And that's a strange place to be alive in, but not fully feeling it yet. There was a man who just kept walking. He doesn't know where he's going. He's just moving. People try to talk to him. He doesn't respond. He just keeps going, walking further, because stopping means thinking, and thinking means remembering. And for some people, moving is the only way to keep him from breaking. In disasters like this, people don't always grab the important things. They grab a photograph, a toy, a piece of clothing, things that don't make sense to anyone else, but mean everything to them. One account describes people refusing to leave behind small personal items even when everything else was gone. Because when your whole world disappears, sometimes the only way to feel like yourself is to hold on to something familiar. There was a child who just didn't understand. It was a little girl sitting in a camp. She's holding a doll. Her parents are talking in low voices. Other people are crying. But she's playing because she doesn't fully understand, not yet. Kids don't always feel the full weight right away, but later it finds them. Here's something survivors carry with them: the smell of the smoke, burned wood, gas. The air was thick with it all. It was just filled with it, hanging over everything. Even days later, people couldn't escape it. It almost like it took life and lived in them. That's the kind of thing that sticks. The smells, the sounds, not just what you saw, but what your body remembers. Then began the night terrors. A woman tries to sleep. She's in a tent, exhausted. Her body shuts down first. Her mind, Well, it won't let go. And every sound feels like fire coming back. Every shadow looks like smoke. She wakes up over and over again, heart racing, because the dangers may be gone, but your mind doesn't believe it yet. People stopped emotionally. Not everyone cried. Not everyone panicked. Some people just went silent. Eyewitness accounts describe people becoming unresponsive, blank, almost disconnected, while others couldn't stop screaming. And both of those reactions, they're real. Because trauma, well, it doesn't exist the same way physically. And both of these reactions, they're real because trauma doesn't look the same on everybody. The man who didn't react, a man hears his house is gone, everything in it just gone. And he nods. No tears, no anger, nothing. Because his mind, it hasn't caught up yet. Sometimes the absence of emotion is the strongest sign of something inside. Imagine trying to rest after all this. Your brain keeps replaying in a loop. The shaking, the explosions, the fire, the screams, over and over and over again. Even when it's over, it's still not over. That's the part of survival people don't see. When the danger's gone, but your mind is still stuck in it. The mental cost of survival, well, by now, people are dealing with that more than their loss. They're dealing with shock, grief, confusion, fear, exhaustion, and none of it has a quick fix. Because this wasn't one moment, it was days of trauma layered upon each other. And what kind of impact? It doesn't just disappear. Now I need to tell you something clearly. The fire still burning in parts of the city. The camps still filling. The aftermath is just beginning. Because next, we step into something even deeper. Strange survival stories, unbelievable moments people swore actually happened, and the ways people adapt to something no one was prepared for. And I need you to stay with this series, because what we're uncovering isn't just happening, it's how people endured it. And what's coming is the strange survival. We're going to get into bizarre stories, some almost unbelievable, unusual behaviors, the famous moments, the cow setup, the odd survival methods, people doing whatever it took to live. All right, y'all, the fire's still burning in parts of the city. The smoke is still in the air. But for a moment, people aren't running anymore. And that's where this part begins. After hours, sometimes days of chaos, there's a moment when things go quiet, not peaceful quiet, uneasy quiet, because your body finally stops moving, but your mind doesn't. And that's when people start to realize what just happened to them. That's when a woman froze. She's sitting in camp. People are moving around her, carrying water, talking, trying to organize, but she doesn't move, not even when someone calls her name, because just hours before, she thought she was going to die. One eyewitness from that day described the experience as so intense that they never expected to come out alive during the shaking and the destruction. But now she's alive, but her mind is still stuck in that moment, in fear, in terror, and can't go forward. It's like part of her never left that fire. There was an unreal feeling. Survivors kept saying the same thing. It just didn't feel real. One account describes people moving through the disaster like they were in a dream, unable to fully process what they were seeing. Because think about it, the ground moved like waves. Buildings collapsed instantly. Fire swallowed entire streets. Your brain has no reference for that. So it protects you by disconnecting. And that's scary in its very own way. Because if it doesn't feel real, then nothing feels stable anymore. Then there was a man who couldn't just stop walking. He kept going through camps, through ruins, no direction, Just someone ask him, "Where are you headed?" He doesn't answer because he doesn't know. Or maybe he can't think clear enough to know. When your mind overloads like that, it does one of two things. It shuts down or it keeps you moving, and neither one means you're okay. Here's what survivors describe next. Even when they're safe, their bodies act like they're still in danger. Hearts racing, hands shaking, every sound feels like it could be another collapse, another explosion, another fire starting. Because fear doesn't turn off just because the danger moves away. Night comes, and for the first time people try to sleep, but darkness makes it worse. Because now you can't see what's around you. Every sound feels closer. Every flicker looks like flames. One woman kept waking up, thinking she could smell smoke again, but it was just a memory. That's the part people don't talk about enough. When your mind keeps replaying it, even when it's over. There was a child who thought it was the end. A child wakes up screaming, says the same thing over and over again. Is it happening again? Because earlier, they believed it was the end of the world. And honestly, many people did. One account from a child at that time described the quake as a feeling like Armageddon, the end of everything. And kids don't have words for trauma. They just feel it. And by now, people begin splitting into two emotional states. You've got those who can't stop crying and those who feel nothing at all. Eyewitness accounts describes some people screaming endlessly, others becoming completely unresponsive. And both of those signs are signs that something inside has been pushed too far. A man is told his home is gone, but he didn't cry. He lost everything, and everything was gone. He just says, "All right, that's it." No tears, no anger, because his mind hasn't processed the loss. Sometimes the brain delays the pain, but that doesn't mean it's gone. It puts you kind of in a memory loop. Now here's where this gets intense, because even when people close their eyes, they're still there in that moment, back in it, hearing buildings collapsing around them, people screaming, flames moving. One witness described the experience as unbearable. It was too hard to fully recount, saying no story could truly capture the suffering of those hours. And that's when you know something changed, when even remembering it feels too heavy to hold. Then there's invisible damage. By now, you can't always see the damage anymore. It's not buildings, the streets, the fire lines. It's in the people. The damage is hiding within the people. It's shown in the way they sit and in the way they stare, the way they jump at sounds. And this part doesn't go away when the fire stops. This story is still moving. Now listen closely, because this matters. The fire is still burning. The city's still broken. The camps are still growing. And what's coming next? We're going to start stepping into stories that almost didn't sound real. Strange survival, bizarre moments, things people did and saw that stayed with them forever. In the next episode, we're going to hear about strange survivals, the famous odd stories, the unbelievable moments, the things people swore happened. And I need you to stay with this series, because we're not done, not even close. In episode 3, we're going to hear about strange survivals, the famous odd stories, the unbelievable moments, the things people swore happened. All right, y'all, take a breath right here, because we've just walked through something heavy. A city that shook apart, a fire that couldn't be controlled, decisions that made things worse, and people pushed to their limits. At this point in the story, you might be asking what's left. Well, the answer isn't simple, because when you look at San Francisco in April 1906, what's left is not the buildings. Those are gone. It's not the streets. Those are unrecognizable. It's not the systems. Those have failed. What's left is people. What people carried forward, people who ran through fire, stood in lines just to eat, watched everything they knew disappear, and still kept going. Some of them froze in shock, couldn't speak, couldn't process it. Others made impossible choices, did what they had to survive. And none of those reactions make someone weak. They make them human. A city reduced but not finished. At the end of these 3 days, over half the population was homeless. Entire districts were gone. But even then, Almost immediately, people started rebuilding. One early report said plainly, San Francisco is beginning to rise again out of its ashes. And that's where something symbolic comes in. San Francisco had already chosen the phoenix as its symbol. And a bird that rises from fire, not destroyed by it, changed by it. And if there was ever a moment that matched that symbol, it's this one. Because here's the truth about disasters. They don't just test buildings, they test people. They reveal fear, strength, desperation, resilience, all at the same time. And if you strip everything away, homes, money, comfort, routines, what you're left with is something raw, the human instinct to survive. And sometimes you rebuild. Now listen, because episode 2 might be ending, this story isn't, not even close. Next, we're going to step into something different. Not just destruction, but the strange, almost unbelievable stories. The moments people still talk about, the things that don't sound real but really are. And I need you to stick with this series because what we're uncovering isn't just history, it's humanity under pressure. Next, in episode 3, you're going to hear about strange survival. Don't miss out. All right, y'all, take a breath right here because we've just walked through something heavy. A city that shook apart, a fire that couldn't be controlled, decisions that made things worse, and people, well, they were pushed to their limits. And at this point in the story, you might be asking, what's left? Well, that answer really isn't simple, because when you look at San Francisco in April 1906, what's left is not buildings. Those are gone. It's not streets. Those are unrecognizable. And really, it's not even the systems. Those have completely failed. What's left is the people. What people carried forward. Well, people who ran through fires, stood in lines just to eat, watched everything they knew disappear, and still, they kept going. Because some of them froze in shock, couldn't speak, couldn't process it. Others made impossible choices, did what they had to do to survive. And none of those reactions make someone weak. They make them human. This city was reduced, but it was not finished. At the end of those 3 days, over half the population was homeless. Entire districts were gone. But even then, almost immediately, people started rebuilding. One early report said it plainly, San Francisco is beginning, and it's beginning to rise again out of the ashes. And that's where something symbolic comes in. San Francisco had already chosen the phoenix as its symbol, a bird that rises from fire, not destroyed by it, changed by it. And if there was ever a moment that matched that symbol, it's this one. Now here's the final reflection on this thought. Because here's the truth about disasters. They don't just test buildings, they test people. They reveal fear, strength, desperation, resilience, all at the same time. And if you strip everything away, homes, money, comfort, routine, well, what you have left is something wrong. The human instinct to survive. And sometimes to rebuild. Now, looking ahead, listen, because episode 2 might be ending, but this story isn't. Not even close. Next, we're going to step into something different. Not just destruction, but the strange, almost unbelievable stories. The moments people still talk about. The strange things that don't sound real, but are. And I need you to stick with this series, because what we're uncovering isn't just history. It's humanity under pressure.